Every so often, you hear on the news that there's a fight taking place over religious symbols on public property. Some Christian group is trying to place the Ten Commandments at the courthouse, and atheists are trying to get them removed. On the one hand, this is a political issue for society to discuss. What role should religion play in the public sphere? Are these commandments an adequate foundation for our judicial system? And does such a display represent preferential treatment? On the other hand, and much more importantly, this is a theological issue. Which 10 Commandments are we even talking about? This is Catholicism in Focus. As the foundation of the moral code in the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments have served as a guide for people of all three Abrahamic faiths for centuries. Even today, the Catechism of the Catholic Church is organized around these commandments, and most likely, if you went to Sunday school of any kind, you probably learned them. What you probably didn't learn, though, is that there are actually 4 different versions of the Ten Commandments. One held by Catholics and Lutherans, another by Orthodox Christians and Protestants, another by Jews, and even another by Muslims. So, who's right? Well, it wouldn't be Catholicism in Focus if the issue were as simple as that. To understand this question, it's important to begin by going to the source, in which case we see that the Ten Commandments are presented twice, once in Exodus 20 and again in Deuteronomy 5. For the most part, they're very similar. But as we'll see in a second, there is one slight difference. At first glance, a few things should immediately stand out to us. First, neither source actually calls what we're reading the Ten Commandments. In some Bibles, there might be a heading that says this or refers to it as the Decalogue, literally the 10 words, but these are all additions by editors and publishers and not original to the text. Later in Exodus 34:28, Deuteronomy 4:13, and 10:4, there's reference to the 10 words, but it does not appear here. Okay, so technicality. There's no title, but no matter what you call it, there's still a list of things we need to follow, right? Not exactly. When we return to our original sources, the second thing that stands out to us is that the words are not numbered or presented in the form of a list. In both texts, what we have is a mix of commandments and exposition, all thrown together in paragraph form. There is much more to the so-called 10 Commandments than we memorized in Sunday school. Like many things of our faith, the source material is too complicated for everyone to remember. And so Jews and early Christians shortened and simplified some of the commandments so that it would be more easily memorized. They also added numbers as a way to refer to individual commandments. Okay, so again, technicality. There's no title and there's no explicit numbering system, but there are still 10 commandments we can all agree on, right? Here is where the true issue lies in our question. As much as we've been taught to believe that there are 10 clearly stated commandments, there are actually more than 10. When we read the text carefully and count all the commands from God individually, there are actually 13 in the Exodus version and 14 in Deuteronomy. Reading the Deuteronomy text in its entirety, let's count them. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall not have other gods beside me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or a likeness of anything in the heavens above or the earth below, or in the waters beneath the earth. You shall not bow down before them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, bringing punishment for their parents' wickedness on the children of those who hate me, down to the 3rd and 4th generation, but showing love down to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not invoke the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave unpunished anyone who invokes his name in vain. Observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you may labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, either you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or donkey or any work animal, or the resident alien within your gates, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. Remember that you too were once slaves in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out from there with a strong hand and outstretched arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may have a long life and that you may prosper in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear dishonest witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not desire your neighbor's house or field, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So, yeah, there's more than 10. And this, of course, ignoring the fact that there are actually 613 laws in all the Torah, these being just the first ones, but that's another issue entirely. Naturally, some of these commandments are fairly similar, and it only makes sense that we would organize them together. Not having idols and not serving them could be simplified together as don't worship false idols, or even absorbed into the first commandment about not worshiping any other gods. Not working on the Sabbath could be interpreted as a further explanation of keeping it holy, and the last two, not coveting a neighbor's house and not coveting a neighbor's wife, slave, donkey, or other possession, can easily be simplified to just don't covet. And while this certainly makes a lot of sense, especially when simplifying for catechetical purposes, it does leave open a large degree of interpretation. Which one should be simplified and which one should be left apart? It's because of this freedom of interpretation that 3 different models have traditionally emerged from the same text, and it's easy to see how there could be even further combinations. In the case of Jews, Catholics and Lutherans, and Orthodox Christians and Protestants, the commandments are all there. They've just chose to come to the number 10 in different ways. Okay, so we should just make larger tablets and print everything in paragraph form so that monuments can keep to the original text. We'll even print in Hebrew so there's no issues of translation. Can we all agree then? You know I'm going to say no. Adding a final wrinkle to this question, we see that Muslims, while among the Abrahamic faiths and looking to the Hebrew Bible as a source of inspiration, have their own religious texts recounting the event with a number of variations. Similar, yes, but representing enough difference that simply printing the Hebrew text would not entirely capture their perspective. So, what do we make of all this? Beyond any question of politics or society, I think it's important to remember that the issue of placing religious symbols in a public space, a space that's supposed to be representative of us all, is much more substantially a question of theology. Since there's no such thing as an objectively true, entirely unifying list of the 10 Commandments, choosing to place one on public property not only favors religion over non-religion, it favors a specific interpretation of religion over all others. And maybe we're okay with that when it's our religion being favored. But would we feel the same way if we saw the Muslim 10 Commandments every time we went to court, or the Jewish Decalogue every time we voted? If not, maybe that's reason enough to give us pause, and maybe, just maybe, see why atheists get so upset over issues like these. Thanks for watching this episode of Catholicism in Focus. This week I want to especially thank Jack Ruskowitz for his contribution to the mission of Breaking in the Habit. Unfortunately, next week's episode will be the last of the season, so be sure to follow all of Breaking in the Habit's social media outlets to stay up to date throughout the summer.